Hello and welcome to Stand Up for Change. My name is Jason Forehand. I am the founder of HR for You Incorporated. And today I have the joy of talking to Sheena Lance Nold. She is a coach, a consultant, a businesswoman, a HR leader. She is an onboarding professional. She is a mom. She is a wife. She is the founder of SLN Coaching and Consulting, and she is our board vice president. Let's give it up, people. Thank you.
Thank you for that warm welcome.
So today we're going to start out really by, I ask everybody who's on Stand Up for Change the exact same question every time. And it is, even if somebody's following you on Facebook, LinkedIn, wherever, what is something either personal or professional that they may not know about you that you're willing to share?
So I would say one thing that people probably don't know about me is I'm incredibly sarcastic and I talk a lot in song lyrics and movie lines.
I love that. I will ask you to give an example of that as we're going. You're like, if you say something from Frozen, though, I may not know. So
so I'll give you an example. Tonight, I sent a message that said, "You're killing me, Smalls," from Sandlot.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. I love that. You're killing me, Smalls. We say that all the time. Jody and I will say that all the time to each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that. That's fantastic. Yeah. I haven't really seen the sarcastic side in our conversations, but I have seen you. I have seen you be a little snarky, like yeah. And I have the killing me, Smalls. That's perfect.
Yeah,
that's perfect.
Well, I think it's and people have shared this with me, like, you seem so serious. You seem so professional and serious. And I'm like, I am, and I can be that way, but fun is a core value for me. So being sarcastic and funny and silly, yes, I can get to business when we need to get to business, but I also want to have fun with what I do. So yeah, I would say that's it's something that people are actually shocked by when they first meet me or have a conversation with me. They're like, I thought you'd be so serious. And I'm like, I need to change that perception because that's definitely not me.
That's awesome. Well, hello, Nick. Thanks for joining us tonight. We appreciate you being here. I know my wife is in the audience. I may not be able to actually see her comments because she's on her phone. And LinkedIn is just goofy about the phone comments. So hello, Nick. Hello, Jody. And, now I'd really love for you to tell the audience about who is Sheena. Tell us about your journey and how you got to where you are now.
Well, how long do you have?
So as long as you want.
Well, so I think the way that I think about life is really in pivotal moments, right? And that's something that I really look at in coaching and consulting is there are always these pivotal moments that we have. And I think I've told you this one, Jason, but one of the things that got me into coaching actually was my own experience. So when my son was about 4 years old, he was in pre-K. He came home with a Mother's Day assignment, as they usually do. And there was one line on there where it said, "My mom is happiest when," and the teacher had crossed out "when" with black Sharpie and wrote "never, nothing makes her happy." And in that moment, I realized this perception, this mirror that my son was holding up to me was not the person I wanted to be. I thought I was. It was really a light bulb moment for me that I am not showing up in the world the way that I want to be showing up in the world. And so I think that in that moment, the next day I scheduled my first appointment with a therapist ever. And I've been in and out of therapy and coaching ever since. And so I think that was a really transformational moment for me to recognize that part of what had led me to where I was that I was not embracing joy in my life. I was going through the motions. I was checking the boxes, right? I was successful from an outsider's perspective, but internally, I felt like nothing was ever good enough. And so I would say that was a really transformational moment that led me into the coaching program that I went into. I mean, I'm, hopefully wrapping up with my master's end of this year, beginning of next year, in positive psychology coaching. And so it's really just kind of changed the trajectory of my life.
Yeah, that's awesome. And
Yeah.
it's important that I love the fact that you called out that you sought help, that
Yeah.
you were not in a we're in mental health month awareness. We talk about that. It is constant. It should be every day, not just a month or a week.
Yeah.
And I appreciate really so much that you're not afraid to say, hey, yeah, I've been in and out of therapy. I get what I need. I also have a coach. You've got mentors, and you coach
Yeah.
and mentor other people. So that is what can help you do those things. So
Yeah.
I think that's fantastic. Mike in the audience, great to see you, buddy. Yeah, good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is important. Thank you, Nick. Yeah, it's so
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
So, all right. So now tell us more about your journey, and then what I love that story, and you have told me that before. I love that story, but tell me more about your journey and how that spawned you to, what tweaked your interest to where you got into onboarding. You did anything in and around human resources or with people in general, and why the things that you're doing led you into having your own coaching and consulting company.
Well, what's interesting is there's a parallel to this story from the other story, right? It's like our pain. We kind of like cultivate like our life experiences from our pain, right? So when I started my career as a personal trainer 20 plus years ago, I didn't have a lot of support and I didn't have a lot of guidance, and I struggled a lot. It was really the first time in my life where I felt like a failure, and that was just kind of a new concept to me. And so when I got my second or third whatever personal training job, it was the same experience. It wasn't any better. Like I didn't have a better onboarding experience. I wasn't set up for success, but at that point I had enough experience to know what I needed to do to be successful. And so I didn't need a lot of that support. But from that, I committed, like, as long as I'm doing this, I don't want anyone else to have the experience that I've had in trying to get started as a personal trainer. So at that time, we had a role where we were doing live in-person training once a month for all of our new personal trainers in a certain geographic location. So I was over the Heartland region with 6 clubs, and I had trainers come in for a week. I taught them, but I try to teach it in a way where it really resonated with them, how important it was to practice their skills. And I think that was something that I didn't recognize, was how many new skills I had to learn, just like anything else we do, right? I didn't recognize how many new skills I needed to learn to be successful as a personal trainer. One of the primary skills being sales. And my mindset around sales was like, I don't want to be a salesperson. I just want to help people. And so I was lucky enough, and you mentioned this a little bit before, but I was lucky enough to have a couple of mentors that helped me with my mindset around sales and helped me understand. And I think Zig Ziglar says this best: a sale is what happens when you're immersed in serving your customer, right? So if you really focus on the people that you're trying to help, the people that you're trying to serve, my philosophy was, if I help enough people, eventually they'll pay me. And they did. I built a really successful personal training business. Within my first, 4 or 5 months, I had a 10K personal training business, was one of the top performers in my club. And from that, I was able to start mentoring and coaching other new trainers. And that led me into eventually onboarding them. And so what we saw with that was a lot of growth, a lot of progress in productivity, and really positive numbers in turnover or retention for new employees. And so that kind of skyrocketed my career into when I left that company. I was a senior national onboarding and development manager, kind of built a full scale onboarding program that onboarded between 100 to 150 new employees a month. And so for me, it was more about the fact that like, I'm doing my part to make sure no one else has the experience that I had. And so that is honestly one of my proudest moments. But one of the things that you mentioned before too, that I want to highlight is I had so many mentors and people who helped me along the way. I feel like that's our responsibility, right? When we have someone else helping us, showing us the way, supporting us, it is our responsibility to share that with other people and to pass that along.
Yeah. I love this comment from Nick. It is so true that we can use our own experiences and what we do and how we do it and the mentors and the guidance that we get to help further other people. So you have taken everything that you've gotten and you've seen and that you've learned and you've poured it into other people. And so that's truly fantastic to me.
Yeah.
So, how did you take that corner to say, you know what? By the way, I love your website and I love what you've done with putting all the pieces together of your programs. How did you come about saying, you know what? I think I'm going to take this to the next level and I'm going to start doing some coaching and consulting. And did that just because of what you were doing in the past, did that just seem like a natural progression or?
I feel like there were so many kind of puzzle pieces that fell together to create that. So on top of onboarding for like new personal trainers, I also did a lot of leadership development. And so I did a couple of leadership programs. We had one called Career Acceleration Program, one called Leadership Awareness Program. And so with those, it was really about helping kind of create that next generation of leaders. So I had this really unique perspective of like the new employee and what they're going through and the leader and what they're going through. So I felt like I was able to really bridge a lot of those gaps and potentially misunderstandings, right? Because if you don't look at things from the lens of the other person on kind of the other side of the story, it's really easy to make up assumptions. For example, I might have leaders that were like, well, these new hires, like they're just not trying hard enough, or they're just not doing this. And I'm like, well, but do they know how to do it? Like, do they feel confident in their ability to do it? And they're like, I don't know. I haven't thought to ask them that. And then they have a conversation and it turns out the new hire's like, actually, you know what? This is really tough for me. Like, it's much harder to go talk to people than I thought it would be. And so it opens up the door for empathy, for compassion, for conversation, right?
Yeah.
And so what I started to realize was a lot of that work that I was doing more with leaders and even with individuals, I didn't want to be confined to four walls and being able to help people and do that, within four walls. So that's when I started my coaching and consulting business. I also recognize that a lot of organizations, smaller organizations, don't necessarily have the budget for a full-time HR, talent development, professional, but they do need some of that support to set up an infrastructure or even just to get some advice or suggestions on how, with the constraints that I have this amount of time, with these resources, what can I do? And I think that what I've seen from other consultants or coaches in the space is it's like they'll give recommendations, but that business or that company doesn't have the resources to do that. So it's like, so what am I supposed to do? Nothing. I'm not supposed to provide any support for my new employees. So I think it's the ability to kind of think outside the box with limited resources, with limited tools, with limited supplies, with limited time, whatever it is. What can we do? What are the possibilities? How can we maximize your resources? How can we streamline processes? That might be as simple as like a checklist, right? Like an onboarding checklist or a sheet, just something to create a little bit of structure to the processes so that steps don't get missed, because I think that's the most important element. When I talk about onboarding, the number one most important thing to me is the experience, because the experience that person has is going to carry with them throughout their entire tenure in that organization. And it's going to carry outside that to how they speak about the organization if they leave.
Yeah, absolutely. And, when you get to the place where people are already leaving, not leaving because you're cheering for them and, they've been with you and they're going on to something that's better and brighter, but there's no ill will.
Yeah.
And everybody is, it's a heartfelt moment. You're sad, but at the same time, you're cheering them because you want the best for your people.
Mm-hmm.
That is so different and leaves a lasting impression. And those people will typically be like, this was a great company. I love this company. I would come back to this company. And sometimes they do come back to the company, but that door will never be open if you haven't poured into them and been doing stuff. I love this. One time I was speaking with someone and they were talking about stay instead of the end, doing the end conversations. It's like, I want to have a conversation with you about staying.
Mm-hmm.
You're here. I want to have this be part of our one-on-ones where we talk to you about how your time is and what's going on and what's going good. I know the other day when we were talking with Nick in one of the shows, and Nick was saying that Island Elevator does a good job of this and talking about her company, talking about staying and what we need and what are the needs of the employees and what are the pain points and how can we move forward. All of those things I kind of tie in from the time you are looking to hire someone, through the onboarding process, through the adventure of them being part of your team. All of that is interconnected into how you keep pouring in so that they are the happiest, most well-rounded, most holistically sound, feeling safe, wonderfully productive employees that hopefully will stay with you longer.
Well, and I think there's a big shift right in the workforce right now. You don't have a lot of people staying at the same company for 15, 20, 30 years like you used to, right? What people are looking for in companies is a mutually beneficial relationship. Do I feel like I have growth opportunities? Do I feel like I can be myself at work? Do I feel like I have a friend at work? And that's a little bit more challenging, right, with a remote workforce and things like that. But people want to feel connected. They want to feel like they're there for a bigger purpose than just a paycheck. And so I think organizations that get this right, what they see is not only increased retention, but their culture is, you can feel the difference in an organizational culture like that versus one that is literally just focused on come in, do your job, and go home. And the challenge in that is the way that the workforce is shifting. It's demanding companies change the way that they operate.
I agree. I absolutely agree. What would you give as I know this is kind of an aside, but what would you give as direction to a leader that might catch this show, or someone who is moving up in a company that can have an impact, because everybody can have an impact in their company? What do you think is something you could give and pearls of wisdom to people that are remote and are leading remote teams? How do you engage those people better that are on your teams, but they're all remote? And how do you keep that culture alive in that way?
Yeah. So I don't think we talked about this at the beginning, but I have my own coaching and consulting business, but I also work full-time for an engineering and design firm, and I am fully remote. So like I am the person that we're talking about right now, right? And I also mentor a couple of younger professionals. And one of the conversations that we have a lot is, what is it you need to thrive? If you need social connection, what are you doing to intentionally create social connection? Is that going into the office? Is that scheduling calls? Is that scheduling coffees? Because so many times and I want to be careful about how we say this, but I also believe in radical ownership. So like so many times we want to blame our organization for not giving us what we need, but we're not communicating what our needs are. And a lot of times we're not even aware of it, right? I know that I crave social interaction and social engagement, but I also recognize when I look at my schedule and it's full of Teams meetings, right? Or I recognize when it's like independent work and it's like, I need to plug in here. I need to schedule a lunch date with some of the local folks that I work with from my team, or I need to figure out how to bridge that gap because I'm craving that social interaction and that social connection. And right now it's not in my calendar. So I think proactively looking at what is within my control to create an environment that I can thrive in. There are other elements to that too. So I believe when you talk about creating an environment that you can thrive in, for me, if that's independent work, that's turning on a killer playlist, right? So I've got like playlists for deep focus. I've got playlists for like energizing, but it's like, what are the things that really help you be the best at what you do? Because I think that too often, like when we're at work, going back to the serious comment, right? Like we feel like, oh, I'm at work, so I have to be dialed in and I have to be like at my desk and I have to be at my computer. And it's like, so much of what I do is creative work. It's outside the box. It's like that's my job. That's what I'm here to do, right? So I need to take responsibility for what creates the most creative thinking for me and put myself in those situations and environments because that's what's best for my organization. Me sitting at my desk, staring at a screen and trying to like knock out some creative solutions I know for me, that is not the way. And so to follow that up, I would say communicating that, right? So people know if I go for a walk on my lunch break, if I go for a walk at noon or whatever time it is, like my work environment is very supportive of all of that. Like do what you need to do to put yourself in the best situation to bring your best self to work, even if it's remotely. The other thing that you asked about, like what can leaders do? Don't make assumptions.
Good.
And I mean, there are so many examples and scenarios and situations that I could talk about with that, but to give a couple. So don't make assumptions about what someone does or does not know. And where this comes from primarily from an onboarding lens is one of the things that comes up most consistently in a lot of organizations and Gallup surveys and things like that is one of the lowest scores on onboarding surveys is role clarity. People don't know what their job is. If they don't know what their job is, there's a pretty good chance that they're not going to excel at it. So don't make assumptions that someone knows what their job is. Don't make assumptions that someone knows what the expectations are of them. Don't make assumptions that someone knows how you prefer to communicate. Don't make assumptions that someone knows, no news is good news. Like the things that you feel like should be assumed, 9 times out of 10, I would say go ahead and communicate them because that person that is making that assumption may assume incorrectly and it creates misunderstanding.
Absolutely. One of the biggest things is making assumptions that you even know your people that well. I mean, if you're making the assumptions and you don't have all the knowledge to back it up of what they like, what tools they need, how they work best, how you can support them, then you're just creating more havoc. And people will absolutely end up taking off. So yeah, thank you, Grace. Thanks for being here as well. And thank you, Lion. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Noni. Thank you, Jody. Thank you, Sharon. We appreciate everybody coming out. I love that. I love that you say that because I think that is probably one of the bigger challenges for leaders, especially when they're dealing with a team that is all remote.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I mean, you make a great point. I think how you communicate is really important. The words you use.
Yeah.
I heard someone, I was on an audio listening in, and someone was talking about the same thing you did. It's like my whole day was filled with, I'm working at a place where I am remote, or and they may have been hybrid, but I look and it's just a whole bunch of these Slack meetings, and it's one meeting to the next meeting to the next
Yeah.
meeting. But then I've got all of these things that I'm supposed to do, but I'm in all these meetings. I'm like, what am I supposed to do this work? Am I
Yep.
supposed to go to these meetings? Do I have to be in all of these meetings? Is it necessary that we do this? And so there's a level of communication as well,
Yeah.
how you communicate, when you communicate, and being concise with that communication. So someone
Yeah.
doesn't have to spend their entire day on 20 Slack meetings, and
Yeah.
they actually can do what they need to do and
Yeah.
be in the space. Like you said, I need to take a walk so that I can,
Yeah.
be in a zone.
Grace
Yeah.
added a great comment here that I think is great to highlight. I would also add, if you must assume, it's good to assume positive attention or intention. Yes, absolutely. And I think that's where curiosity can be a really helpful tool for leaders. I wonder why, right? Like, so just starting with that statement, I wonder why they're struggling with getting this task done, or I wonder what might be causing them to struggle with this. And asking that question, because again, I think that we a lot of times we assume the worst in others but the best in ourselves, right? I can't remember what that bias is called, but so it's really important to kind of reflect on that. The other thing, going back to that whole concept of radical ownership as a leader, I think it's really important to look at, have I done everything I can do to set this person up for success? So a lot of times, if I see a performance gap, and I don't have direct reports right now, so I work a lot with leaders and like leadership coaching. But if the leaders that I work with are seeing a performance gap, then I'll ask them, okay, do you have evidence that this is a knowledge, skill, ability, or attitude gap? Do you have evidence that it's one of those? Do we know that there are tools or resources or software that they need to know how to use proficiently to complete this task that they are not proficient in? That's easy. We can cover that with training, right?
Right.
We can get them training on that. Attitude, what's the cause of the attitude gap? You know what one of the top causes of the attitude gap is? Poor onboarding. They didn't learn it whenever they were starting, so they become disgruntled, they become disengaged, and they're still there because they're collecting their paycheck, but they're not bought into the organization anymore because the organization wasn't bought into them whenever they first started.
God, now you've affected the behavior, so the behavior is not positive. If you want to change that behavior, you've got even double work to do, because now
Yeah.
you've got to regain trust.
Yeah.
It's
The
much
other
harder
thing,
to regain trust.
yeah, it is. And I think, but it's also like, I feel like a lot of leaders either lean one way or the other, right? They either spend a lot of time on their underperformers or they spend a lot of time on their top performers. And the problem is, you need to have some level of balance between that, because you don't want to not pay any attention to your top performers and have them start walking out the door because they don't feel like they're getting opportunities for growth and development and conversations and affirmation and acknowledgement of the hard work that they're doing. And you also need a process for underperformers of what does it actually look like? And like I said, the starting point for me is this a knowledge, skill, ability, attitude gap? Great. Now let's talk about how we can bridge that gap.
Yeah. I remember this years and years ago. There were all these acronyms for, creating training programs. And really, it got down to behavioral techniques for making the determination as to what was the barrier.
Mm-hmm.
And it's exactly the same thing as what you're describing.
Yeah.
Probably a lot more succinctly than having an acronym that you have to remember. And then, but uh, when you are talking to your people on a regular basis and you have that rapport and you have the ability to understand them, what they need, who they are, see their strengths and weaknesses, help them see their strengths and weaknesses, and really move forward in that process, all of these things become so much easier.
Mm-hmm.
And in the entire process of keeping employees and having them be more productive, having them buy in, having them help you build such a culture just becomes part of what is done. And I'm going to mention this again, but I love how Nick describes the culture in Island Elevator here in our home state of New York. And there are multiple companies out there doing great, great things, but I love calling attention to those companies that are setting a standard. I want to take, dadgum, Mike. I want to take time to let you finish. We're almost through with the show, but I want to ask you some of my favorite parts. I love that you joined us as a partner, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm really thrilled that you became the vice president on our board. Some of the things that you have been able to accomplish in such a short period of time are just phenomenal. How we changed our onboarding, how we reach out to the new people that are coming on, and how we get people involved and engaged with what we do is very much associated with you joining us. So why did you join HR for You and as a partner and a board member, and what do you see on the horizon for us?
Why did I join? I think the cause is definitely one worth getting behind. Making sure everyone has access to a living wage, I think is really important. I also come from a position of privilege, and I feel like when you have privilege, you should use that privilege to help other people who don't have as much privilege as you do. So I think that is really important to me. I think the initial like engagement that you and I had on LinkedIn and our conversations, you just seemed like a very genuine, heartfelt person, which, authenticity is a core value for me. I can kind of see through the BS with people, I feel like, pretty quickly. And, I wasn't getting that with you. I really loved that 100% of donations went straight to causes. I think that's really unique for a nonprofit to really like literally put their money where their mouth is whenever it comes to the causes that they serve. So I thought all of that was really important in becoming a partner. In the conversation that you and I had, and I'll just be like super transparent with it because again, like role clarity, I was like, Chasen, I would love to help. I don't really know how I can serve. Like, what do you need? Then maybe I can figure out like where my skill set fits in and, where I can help there. And then in that conversation, I was like, I could do that. I could do that. That's my skill set. I could do that. So, I mean, through the conversation, right, that's kind of how it went. But I also want to acknowledge, like, if you're a partner in HR for You, we have so many things in the works. Like, I think the biggest challenge that people have to onboarding, and this is like, we're seeing this in real time within HR for You, is so many people have this vision for what they want any program to look like, right? But like specifically, we'll talk about onboarding. They have this vision for what they want the program to small steps. So we started with small iterations and look at like the progress that we're making with all these different steps that we need. And we're also looking at how can we pull more people in, but we need to be able to clarify roles and responsibilities before we do that. So I think really like everything that we're talking about ties into my role as VP of the board, but also some of the things that we're working on specifically within partner onboarding. It's not perfect right now. It's not even close to where I want it to be, But I also acknowledge that we're all people doing the best that we can. We're humans with, lives that we're living outside of this. And so I hope that we will have other people join us and be a part of the cause. And we're onboarding lots of new partners soon.
Yes. Well, to Nick's point, one of the greatest ways that our partners can help and that we appreciate is just like what they're doing right here, showing up to support when we have events, showing up to shine a light when we post, when you can, because we all have lives, and you could spend a full-time job's worth of time just doing social media. Trust me, I know, because I do a ton of it and multiple platforms for our crew here. And that's part of what I'm trying to offboard, know.
But I do think that's important to highlight though too, because like for me to be involved, I have to figure out what are my boundaries. Right. That's my job. That's not your job. I have to figure out what are my boundaries, what is sustainable for me. I have 2 small kids who are in youth sports, which means I'm gone, 6 out of the 7 nights of the week. So, I'm not on a lot of these things, and that's okay.
Yeah.
If that's how you can contribute, great, show up. If it's a donation, great, show up. Like whatever it is to you. And I think everyone has to kind of figure out like, what is your role? If you don't know what your role is, reach out. We can help you figure that out. But I think everyone can play a part and can play a role. It's just about figuring out what are your strengths, what are your skill sets, what are your passions, what do you love to do? And then does that fit within kind of what the needs are, not just with HR for you, but really with any nonprofit or, volunteer organization that you want to get involved in.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It takes 2 hands to shake on it. Yeah. I love that. Well, you know what? It has been, I'm so honored to have you as our board vice president. I'm thrilled to know you as a human being. I appreciate you so much and appreciate what you do and how you show up, how you shine. Thank you, everybody who came tonight. Thank you, everybody who is a partner with us. We've got several of our partners, Nick and Sharon and Mike Escher-Brainer and the Hounds of Business Community, that are partners with us. And we are starting to promote, you'll see in future episodes, the Hounds of Business Community sponsoring us. And we are thrilled to have them as a sponsor. We are thankful for them and all that they do. And we're thankful for all of our partners. This has been a great show. Thank you for being here, Sheena, and thank you for all that you do. We are out of time, but we want to tell you to come back in 2 more days, and Sheena and I are going to bust out some information that you need on our People Community event. You can find that out on our LinkedIn page or our YouTube site. We are so close to 2,400 subscribers. So if you're not subscribed, go to our YouTube channel, subscribe, help us with likes, views, share our posts. You would not believe we're so close to 2,400 subscribers, so close to over 80,000 views. Thank you so much for everybody who's made that happen, made that possible. It is great to see everybody. Thank you for being here in the show. And thank you so much, Sheena, for being here tonight. Give it up one more time.
Listen, and thanks everyone for hopping on tonight. Appreciate your support.
Have a great time. We'll see you later.